So let me get us started. I'm really excited to have there. Here she comes. Hi, Kimberly. How are you? Okay. I just wanted to tell you how excited I am to have Nancy. She's so brilliant, and I admire everything she's done. She knows women so well. And here's her bio. Nancy Collier is a psychotherapist, interfaith minister, author, public speaker, and mindfulness teacher. A longtime student of Eastern spirituality, mindfulness practices form the ground of her work. She is the author of the recently published Can't Stop Thinking, which is New Harbinger, which is the book we're talking about, and also The Power of Off, the mindful way to stay sane in a virtual world. And that's from Sounds True, 2016. Inviting a monkey to tea, befriending your mind and discovering lasting contentment and getting out of your own way, unlocking your true performance potential from Luminous. Nancy is a national speaker on well-being, mindfulness, and technology, and has been featured on Good Morning America, the New York Times, and countless other media. She's also a regular blogger for Psychology Today and the Huffington Post. In addition, Nancy spent 25 years as a top-ranked equestrian in the National Horse Show circuit and serves as a performance consultant to professional athletes and artists. She is available for psychotherapy, public speaking, workshops, mindfulness training, and spiritual counseling. Oh, you just don't do it all, do you?
Busy.
That's great. Yeah, really. So you were going to speak. You have something that you want to talk about for 15 minutes?
Well, yeah, I thought I'm really interested in what, since thinking is a universal problem and gift, I'm always more interested in what you all live in terms of what bothers you with thinking, what works with thinking, how you experience thinking, and so on. So I don't want to use too much time yammering on about the book. You can read the book, but I wanted to give just a little bit of an introduction to the topic. And then Lesley and I will talk, and then I'll get to hear the real questions from the field, which is always more interesting than my thinking. But why I wrote the book is a good place to begin, because as a human being, right, I struggle also with a busy mind. That's not you. That's just the nature of the beast. And my particular busy mind was one that enjoyed, or I shouldn't say enjoyed, but was obsessed with going over and over and over what was bothering me. And mostly it had to do with my relationship at the time. And I would go over what my partner had said that bothered me and why it was the wrong thing to say, and then how I was going to fix it. But I would do this all day long, all night long, all week long, all month long. And, 90% of thoughts are repetitive and 95% of them are negative. So most of what I was repeating, all of it was repetitive, and most of it was causing me pain. And so this was just how I lived. I lived this way for years and years and years, as many of us do. We imagine that somewhere in all of the thinking, we're going to figure out the problem, right? If I just think about it long and hard enough, there's an answer in the rubble. I know there's an answer, right? So we're on the side of our mind in the sense that it's just very primitive. It's trying to discover some way of turning this for the 112,000th time that will release a way of looking at it that won't be so painful, right? And at the same time, we are, if this is our particular addiction, is to sort of our grievances and what we would do differently, we are in essence trying to always prove our case that we're right. We go over and over and over in this sort of courtroom of one, We're the judge, we're the jury, we're the, defendant, and we are arguing our case that we're right. And the way we see the interaction is right. And at the same time, we're planning the conversation that's going to fix the thing, right? Because what we're resisting all the time in all this thinking is, I cannot figure it out. I cannot. I have tried this in every form, every way, every style. That's what the mind resists. I can't figure it out. I don't know. So we go back into the loop because we can't accept I don't know, right? And so in my particular case, one day, I've done a lot of meditation for years. And one day I was walking through the park and it was a glorious day like it is today in New York. And I was going through over and over, same problem. And at the same time, I was probably planning something that I, had been planning for years and years. I was probably worrying about something that I couldn't control. I was probably, doing a whole bunch of other sort of addictive thinking behaviors. And all of a sudden, I had that moment where I got it, that I was causing my own suffering. And I was missing everything in my now, everything. I was missing the park. I was missing the day. I was not in my life. I was in this loop, down this rabbit hole that I'd been down so many times. And in that moment, I had that lasting shift from being aligned and identified with thought to being the one the thoughts were talking to. I became the listener. And then I said, my God, stop. I don't need to pay attention to this all the time. But in that fundamental shift, I stopped believing that my thoughts were fundamental truth. I stopped believing that there was a reason to keep going through it because I could figure it out. I could mentally muscle my way through this problem and not feel all the suffering that went with it. I could get an answer with more thought. I made that shift. And it was so profound in my life when that happened, because suddenly I didn't have to get dragged around by every thought that, this out of order computer in my head was spitting at me. I didn't have to follow every thought. I didn't have to, because a thought happened, I didn't have to think about it. That's liberation. When a thought comes down the pike and we can decide whether or not it's interesting to us to follow, because we no longer are assigning our thoughts with, we're no longer in love with our thoughts, for one thing. We're no longer enamored with everything our mind produces. And we also don't believe them so wholeheartedly. So because we have a thought doesn't mean it's truth. Doesn't mean much of anything other than we heard it somewhere, our parents told us that, memories have created that thought. Our ultimate faith in thought as the truth loosens. It gets much lighter there. But it's funny, when I went to my publisher and I said, I want to write a book about this. And I called it Our Addiction to Thinking, because it is an addiction, right? I pitched it that way, and every editor I met with said, never. No. Thinking is not an addiction. It's not an addiction. It's the best thing we do. It's so fabulous for us. And then when I presented them with, in the DSM, what are the 6 or 7 markers of substance abuse? And to a T, every single one of them had 6 answered yes, which qualified them when it came to thinking as moderate to severely addicted to thinking, right? But what it showed me in all the resistance I received is that don't mess with thought. people get very scared when you say, oh, we might change our relationship with thought. I'm not saying don't think, that's absurd. We're always going to think, right? And thoughts are always going to happen. Just like, I don't know, the pancreas produces insulin, the mind produces thought. That's going to happen. What I propose in the book is, how do we want to be in relationship with our thoughts? I'm not going to take your thoughts away. You know, one friend said, you're going to have me sitting in front of a blank wall, oming for my whole life, right? I want thought. Thought's where the juice is. That's where it gets exciting. Okay, that's wonderful. But wouldn't it be wonderful if we could have choice in terms of what we're thinking about? Because most of us, we wake up in the morning and we're deluged with thoughts. We're just deluged and we're dragged around, you know, fear thoughts, worry thoughts, you know, problem thoughts. Nothing that the mind likes better than a good problem to gnaw on. That's when the mind is happy. But we don't have a choice. We're like a dog dragged around by a bone by our thoughts. And all of that thinking, again, is stealing, is the thief of our present moment. So what I'm teaching in the book is to let the thoughts run. That's okay. But to be able to have enough distance between us and the thoughts that we can move towards thought or not, but it's up to us. And so there's a re-identification, not with thoughts, that we're not thought. We're the ones the thoughts are talking to. That shift frees you up for your life. That is the fundamental shift. And there's a whole bunch of stuff written in the book about how we do that. But self-help to some degree gets it wrong, or it falls short, I would say, because it still believes that our basic state of being, how we are, our mood, our everything else, depends on the content of our thought. So it teaches us how to replace negative thoughts with positive thoughts. It teaches us how to have the thoughts we want coming down the pike. But 30 years as a therapist, I will tell you that when the going gets rough and life gets challenging, that system doesn't work. We revert back to our default of the negative, which is neurologically programmed into us for reasons Lesley and I will probably talk about. But the only thing that really works in terms of real freedom is if our well-being doesn't depend on our thoughts being positive or negative. If you're going to pick a narrative, right, pick the positive one. Create positive, great. But it's when we no longer have to believe the thoughts, whatever they're saying, then we're starting to really get free. And then we're not so scared of the negative thoughts because we don't have to think them because they appear. So the last thing I'll say is that there's a lot of stuff in the world with the pandemic and so much suffering right now. And I would say that the majority of our suffering comes from what we're doing inside our own minds, what we're doing with what's happening in the world, what we're doing with our own experience. And that piece we have control over. We don't have as much control over the external environment, but we do have control over the weather in our own consciousness. And that's what I hope we can get into more today.
Nancy, can you talk a little bit about how you do that? I mean, as a meditator, I kind of know you can get there through meditation where you can let the thoughts just go by you.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're not into meditation,
Right. Well,
how do you get there? Is it a lot of training, or what do you suggest for getting there?
well, the first thing we have to do to get there is to recognize what our mind is doing to us, what our thoughts are doing to us. We have to, it's like any addiction. We have to own the fact that we never stop thinking. You know, we have to own the fact that there are many times that we want to stop thinking and we can't. and that that's causing us harm. So the first step is to just recognize everyone here signed up for this. So there's some sense of, I don't know, my relationship with my thinking is maybe not what I would like it to be. The second step after a recognition of that and an acknowledgement of, you know, I just wish there were some gaps in my thought, or I wish, you know, one friend of mine, she said, you know, I was taking a walk with my daughter the other day. She has 5 children. And she said, you know, we were walking, and the whole time we were walking, I was narrating the experience. Oh, isn't this lovely? I never get to spend enough time with her. Oh my gosh, you know, I wish I had spent more time. The whole time she's telling herself the story of what's happening. And she said, I never was in the walk because I just was like,
Yeah.
oh, so we have to recognize it. That's the first thing. The second thing is we have to be willing to turn the lens around, whether it's in meditation or can be in a moment in the day, and look at what's happening in my mind. That doesn't take 10 minutes of meditation. That's just to listen in to your own thoughts, which most of us, it's funny, we have this amazing education system in this country, but we never learn the basics of well-being, which is to listen to what the soundtrack of our own consciousness is. For most people, we're talking to ourselves all day long.
Right.
All day.
Some of us are talking out loud too.
Yes, well, that too. You know, in the pandemic, we're all talking out loud. But
right.
there's a soundtrack going on. And so the second and really critical step in this is the willingness to tune in to the radio station that's on in our own mind. So that's when we start witnessing our own mind. It can happen, you know, I'll do it 4 or 5 times in a day. I just stop and I listen to what I'm telling myself, what tracks are running. And I do that in addition to, you know, a 15-minute meditation during the day, which some people may or may not have time for. We always have time to just stop and drop, stop and listen, right? And we have to be willing, in order to make this shift, we have to be willing, and this is the hardest one, when we're really down the rabbit hole and we're going over and over and over something, we have to be willing, just as an experiment, because we can always go back to our addicted thought-driven life, to pull away, to leave the thoughts and say, I can't figure this out right now. I'm going to turn my attention back to the present moment, take a breath, and be where I am. So it's just an experiment. We have to be willing at the moment when it feels like I've got the bone, I'm deep down in this. This is the problem, that if I solve this problem, it'll solve all the problems. I have to be able to turn back to now, to where I actually am now, and let it go and see what that feels like. It's so counterintuitive. And to come back into the body, this present moment, this breath, to try it out. I have to try it out once, see if I die by leaving the thoughts behind.
That's interesting. Yeah. See if I die, right? We think those thoughts are protecting us, right?
We think they're going to save us. And at the same time, existentially, you know, if you think about Descartes, for example, I think, therefore I am. We actually existentially experience ourselves in existence when we're thinking. Oh, it's me. I'm thinking. I feel myself, right? But when we turn away, drop the storyline, and experience just this moment, this air that's against my skin, this breath, but without thinking, there's a kind of terror that comes over us. Where am I? I'm not thinking. This is the being space. And for most of us, because there are no gaps between thought, we never get to have the sense of ourselves as being without thinking. So we don't think we can actually exist if we're not thinking.
Mm-hmm.
So when I say, I don't say that lightly, we imagine keep the thinking going, not only because that's what's going to save us, but because if I stop thinking, I won't be here.
Mm-hmm.
The mind that generates the thoughts won't be here. And that's terrifying.
Mm-hmm.
But that's like riding a bicycle. When you notice a gap between thoughts, which may happen once in a day, to just notice that I didn't go away because there was a gap. Usually the moment we experience a gap in thought, the mind doubles down. It gets so frightened. It says, oh my God, where'd I go? Where'd I go? Oh, wow, I must be really spiritual. Oh, who can I tell? I wasn't thinking, right? It grabs onto it as something to think about. But if we get the hang of that, oh, we're still here, even when we're not thinking, then it's a little bit less scary to let the mind be off duty a little bit, rest.
Is that something we've learned, or are you saying that it's just intrinsic? I mean, is it a Western culture thing that I think, therefore I am, and if I turn it off, I'm in danger? Or is that's just the amygdala going, I'm gonna just always be telling you how to protect yourself every hour, every second, every hour of the
Yes,
day?
both. I think it's both. I think here in the West, because I did a lot of research with people from an Indian culture, and there's certainly less of it
Uh-huh.
in other parts of the world. What I would say in the West is that we are our God now is the mind, right?
Mhm.
Science, reason, this is what we revere, right? If we can explain it, it exists. And we've allowed the rational mind to kidnap all the other ways of knowing, right? The body's knowing, the spirit's knowing, the soul's knowing. And so what we have now is we have a culture that is entirely devoted to mental knowing. And so that, is a lovely handshake with the sense that you don't exist if you're not thinking,
Mhm.
right? They work together. And at the same time, I think from the moment we kind of crawled out of the ocean as a single cell or whatever we were, and became separate, right? We became a separate entity from the ocean, that there has been this attempt to protect that separateness, right? And we feel that separate me by thinking. I'm usually thinking about, how can I be more comfortable? How was I seen? How was I perceived? How am I? Do I like that? Do I not like that? We're always thinking about this little me, right? But when we relax the thinking and take a breath and just experience, not think about experience, but just actually experience, we feel a little bit more of that ocean quality of a kind of what we call in non-duality, a non-localized self. So there's being, but there's no me in the middle of the being, right? It's like meditation without a meditator. I'm not meditating. Meditation is happening.
Hmm. So talk a little bit and then we'll take questions in a few seconds. I just have this one last question where you say how to stop believing that your thoughts are true.
Yeah.
That's really scary because if our thoughts aren't true, what the hell are they? Right? I mean,
Yeah.
that's really scary.
Well, you do enough research in this area and you do enough meditation and you actually get it that, and I don't say this to be facetious, that we really have this wonky, crazy thing here. In Buddhism, we call it the monkey mind who's drank a bottle of wine, whatever you want to call it. But it's really just kind of wild and untamed. And gathered all these images and gathered all these memories, and it spits out a whole bunch of stuff, right? And part of the recovery from our addiction to thought is learning to actually question the veracity of our thoughts. So because a thought appears, our conditioning is such, as I said, that it's radically important. It's brilliant. It definitely deserves our attention. And it's not just true, it's fundamental truth. It is what is. But if we move towards that a little bit and we say, do I agree with what my mind just told me? Does that actually, can I do some reality testing? Does that match my experience? So often, Lesley, it doesn't. So that's what I mean when you really have boots on the ground experience of it's spitting things at you that don't ring true. It hasn't been your experience, right?
Mhm.
And so we have to get a kind of turn going where we doubt our own mind. And with that, we are asking the question, does that thought, because it's true for me, does that mean it's, let's say we think it is true, does that mean it's the truth? Because part of what comes up so much in, I work often as a couples therapist, is if I am convinced that my thought is what is, then I can't bear the idea that someone would have a different thought, because I have the key to the castle on truth. So I've got to get you to see, because I have the truth. But when we get it, that even if our thought appears true to us, that's just one reality in billions of realities, all of which are equally true. That loosens us up so we can have a relationship with somebody who has a radically different idea, a radically different thought or experience or fundamental way of being, because the production of our mind just is that. It's just the production of our mind.
So then you can get to the terminology, which some of us have heard with some of the coaches that we work with at Covey, who can say, I'm telling myself the story that
Right.
believe blah, 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 instead of, you're behaving that way, but I'm telling myself, is that correct? It's where you can actually go in and ask that question.
And that freedom, just as a last thing, when we talk about narratives, right, none of us are living what's happening in the world. We're living our narrative of that story. So if I have a pain in my foot this morning and I write the narrative, oh, that's most certainly, some sort of fatal condition that this is the first symptom of, that's the story I'm in, right? But what's tragic is that we're all walking around in our made up movies that have to do with our families and our histories and blah, blah, blah. Nobody's living just what happened. And so we're all bumping into each other with different versions of reality because they're all narrative driven, which means they're all made up.
Oh my goodness. Okay. On that, I'm going to ask for questions because I know some of you guys definitely know about ruminating. I know, Suzanne, you had a question about one of the things that Nancy said you wanted her to repeat.
Yeah, the moment that you said your realization, so this is like a long time ago in what you've just been talking about, but that realization, I was like, wow, that makes so much sense. And then it just like slipped out of my mind. Is it possible? Could you sort of repeat just that moment that you had? Because
yes,
that would be
it's
great.
it's not also too coincidental that it slips out of your mind.
I know, right?
The mind is not like that information at all, right?
That's sort of what I figured. And it was funny. It seemed like, yeah, I get that. And then it was like, wait a minute, what is it that I just got?
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes, yes, yes. Yes, I hear this all the time because the mind senses danger. It really is like that, right? Oh, that's something that's about not letting me roll and believing that you're me. No, 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 bye. And then we forget, amnesia. So what I said was that in that moment in the park, this beautiful day, I had this, oh my God, I'm down the rabbit hole with the same problem. I've been down the rabbit hole for 10 years with, and no matter any conversation I have with this person, it's not going to change through more thinking about this. I'm not going to get what I want by thinking about this anymore. I want peace, and it's not going to come from rolling this around another way and coming up with another way of explaining it in all its detail and why I'm right. It's not going to work. And in that moment, I got it that I was causing myself my own suffering, that I was now the perpetrator of my own suffering by repeating this and repeating this and repeating this. And simultaneously, I was missing my life. And in that moment, I shifted from being aligned and identified with the thoughts and this chasing an answer that would make me suffer less, to being the one that the thoughts were talking to.
The one that the thoughts were talking to. Okay, that's, yeah. So it's basically you're separating yourself from your thoughts,
Okay.
right? And it's as if these thoughts are well, these thoughts. It's almost like they could be somebody else's thoughts in a way, and you can choose to listen to what somebody else has to say or not, and acknowledging that since it's in your brain and you're listening to them, that they are your thoughts, but you still have this choice to listen to them or not, and to recognize that you are separate from your thoughts.
That's it.
That's, you're not necessarily defined by them. The thing that I had this major realization when I was a mother of young children, of very young children, is I kept thinking that there was a right sippy cup. All I had to do was find that right sippy cup, and everything would be fine,
Yes. Yes.
And that's sort of what I think of my thoughts too. It's like, if only I could think the right thought, then it would solve everything, or solve this one thing that I'm thinking of. And so it's that addiction to thinking that I can think the right thought.
That's it. And that's what self-help
Yeah.
actually kind of encourages.
Yeah.
That's, and everybody is chasing the right paradigm of thoughts.
Yeah.
And this is where it just goes off the rails, because freedom could be a right thought, could be a wrong thought. That's not your path to peace.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And, there's a wonderful book by Mark Epstein called Thoughts Without a Thinker. And I read this, 2 decades ago, but it essentially helps you understand that thoughts appear, they just appear. And we love to be the author of it. We love to be to blame, and credit. But when you start looking at thoughts as something, again, that just the mind produces, it's not quite so personal. We don't have to take authorship for our thoughts. Then it really is like just thoughts. And you're the one listening or choosing to move towards them or not move towards them, but you're not them.
Anybody else have a question or a comment? I know you guys have questions. Someone jumped in. You're not shy. Come on. I know. Andrea, I know for sure.
Because I don't really have a question. I'm just trying to absorb this whole. I mean, my brain is, I don't have a question. It's just, I think the same things over and over again. They're not like doom and gloom, like things that are really scary. I don't imagine. Like my daughter lives in Tel Aviv right now, and I'm not projecting. I'm petrified, but I'm not imagining bad things, God forbid, happening. I'm not like that. But like,
what do you rethink? I'm curious.
I learned from our other coaches, like I should in myself all day, you know, like why am I sitting at my house in this gorgeous, porch, looking at this land that I've lived in this house for 36 years, and why didn't we ever do plantings? Why didn't we ever do this? Why don't I, and then I go through the whole thing. Why don't I have a 401k? Why don't I do this? Why did I become self-employed and poor? It's all that stuff. And then what happens is I end up sometimes, and what you said before, I think makes sense, is like, I'll look at my husband and the poor guy's just freaking watching the Yankee game. But I've had so many negative thoughts about my life in the past 5 hours that I'm just pissed off at him because we didn't make enough money. But he has no idea I'm annoyed about that because he's just watching the Yankee game, So that's how my brain, it's always going.
Well, one thing I would say about, because one of the common categories is regret, right? A lot of people spend a lot of time on regret and a kind of shaming and blaming of themselves for not being who they were supposed to be, right? And so again, the first thing we always do is we try and understand what the mind is trying to do with that line of thinking. So we first take the side of the mind because it's really primitive. So it's trying to help you in some way, right? And in that case, when we've regretted something, there is a kind of mistaken belief that if I shame and blame myself over and over and over again, I'll prevent that from happening again. I won't let myself be that person ever again because I keep reminding myself, you see what you created, you're just blah, blah, blah. And so the intention there, right, is to keep reminding you of what you haven't done so that you do it next time. But when we take a more compassionate view, right, what we realize is that what the mind is not allowing there is that was the best I had at that moment. That choice I made was the best choice I had. Even if I knew better in my intellectual brain, the choice I made was the best choice because it was the choice I made. And that defines it as the best I had available to me. I couldn't make the choice perhaps I knew intellectually I should make. What I was capable of was that.
And it's also interesting because it's also, if I look at the flip side, a lot of it was conscious because, as my friends always say, is like my husband and I created a phenomenal family, and we gave up a lot of things so that we could be at every game and every play. So that took away the corporate job that I could have had so I look back and I'm trying to do more of that gratitude stuff because I'm the luckiest person in the world, even with all my mishigas and problems, So,
what I would say, Andrea, too, though, is we love things to be black and white, right? So what I would say, and that's such a beautiful reframe that you just did there, because our shamer and blamer that comes in and tells us what we did wrong all through our life, right? That person, that voice, it's like it's completely disconnected from our reality. So what I love is you went back there and said, wait a minute, I made those choices consciously because of what my values were. That's why, the regret voice comes in, the shaming, blaming voice comes in and says, why'd you do that? Why'd you do that? But if we reframe that and give that a different tone, hey, why did you make those choices? You know why you made those choices. And so we change the tone of that question to be on your side. And then what really kind of cracks the system open is when we can make space for everything, the giant and, which is not that I didn't give anything up, not like I also don't experience a sense of loss because of what I didn't get to do, but both are true. I made the choice to choose family and I got this beautiful family experience, and I also mourn the loss of wow, I wish I could have had both. And it's just not possible. So we open to what's really the truth, but from your side, right? Because when that blamer comes in, we got to say, hey, I made that choice knowingly. And I agree with you. Boy, do I wish I could have had that too. You feel that it's a on your side energy. Yeah.
Does that
Thank
make
you.
sense to you,
Yeah,
Andrea?
it does. It does.
Yeah.
Julia, do you want to speak up, or I can run your question for you? Either one.
Hold on.
Here you go.
Thank you. Well, what I just heard was self-compassion is incredibly important, and that we all tend to be our worst critics. And if we were in a negotiation, we are always taking the other side instead of our own side. But I just saw this, like when you just said, I'm just basically saying you need to stick up for yourself. And yes, you know, you may have to give a little to get, but what you get is what you decided to do at that time. So thank you. That was an interesting way to sort of think of it as a negotiation, but we always tend to be, it's like, why am I always helping the other side?
Yes. Yes, absolutely. And many of us, have come from households where that was the norm.
Right.
You take the other guy's perspective and what you do wrong to create this. We have to really unlearn that, so that when our inner blamer comes in, we say, wait, this is why I did that. Well, what about if it came from my experience, right? And I want some compassion for what I had to give up to make that choice.
Right. That's an interesting piece. My question goes back to another statement that you made a few minutes ago about separating your thoughts from yourself. If you're the one who created the thought, what are the tricks that you have to say you don't have to be so vested in that thought, even though you created that thought, that you have the choice?
I don't think you created that choice. The thought happened. You are the awareness within which that thought is appearing. You didn't create it. I would never create 90% of the thoughts I have. God, no, I don't create those. But what gives us the idea, it's a kind of a crazy process. We don't create our dreams. We don't create our thoughts. Some of them are magical. Most of them are utterly boring, right? My daughter is going to college in 3 months, and I have gone over the planning and packing more times than I would like one to know. I'm not creating that. My mind obsessively does it. I go, the college repeat. We start naming, the negative. Oh, that's Aunt Matilda. Oh, hello, Matilda. Matilda's here. Oh, and then the one who tells us everything that can go wrong. Oh, look, it's Jim. Hi, Jim. Right? There are just all these memories and relatives and all of it just in there. You're not the creator. You're the one that they're talking to, dying for your attention, vying, dying, grabbing for your attention. That's up to you.
Yeah, I guess getting unvested in trying to say that it's not specifically we created that it's just flying through.
It's like with random intrusive thoughts. Most people have random intrusive thoughts. I have one client that whenever she's on the subway tracks, she hears, you're going to jump. You're going to jump. You're going to push your kid, right? You're going to push your kid. She's not suicidal. She's not homicidal. I have another client, whenever he goes to the theater, he hears, you're going to yell something out. You're going to yell out when it's really quiet. You're going to yell out. Yell something really awful out, right?
I want to do that too.
Yeah, we all have them. I used to have the thought for years when I would drive over a bridge, turn over, pull over there. You're going to do it.
Yeah.
I have no desire to pull off the bridge. And so we're trained in this culture that every thought holds some deep unconscious meaning. It's valuable. It says something about us, and we've got to go figure that out. Otherwise, it'll come true. It'll happen, whatever it is that we believe, but we've got to get to the bottom of it. Absolutely not. Our thoughts are like if you're walking by a crazy person on the street and they're yelling at you, you don't spend a lot of time saying, oh, what are they yelling? You know, I wonder what that means. Is there something about me that makes them yell that? No, you just, whatever you do with it. But it's a bit like that. And when we drain them of their incredible value and meaning, I wish I didn't hear that when I drove over bridges, but do I need to negate it? Do I need to go through a whole process where I explain to it why I don't want? No, it's just happening.
Yeah, that's an interesting concept. I've been driving and it's like I see someone and I go, I could just hit them.
Yes, yes.
And it's like, what is going on? But I don't think more about it. I go through the light or whatever. Right. So right. I have to think of those other self-limiting thoughts in the same way.
Same way. We just we drain them of their great importance. It's a bit like the emperor has no clothes. They've gotten us convinced that they matter so much and they love that spot.
Yes.
But it's really, we wear our thoughts like a loose garment.
Thank you. That was helpful.
So Nancy, what are the techniques besides meditation to get yourself unhooked? Because I think that's one of the questions is how do you get that distance?
Right.
And are there, things besides meditation you can do or?
Well, so remember when we were talking earlier, I said all through the day, we stop and we turn the lens to notice what's happening. Now, what we're doing is we're separating from thought. We're not inside them, of them, but we're going, what's going on in there? Then we can do the veracity test. Often it's just a whole lot of static, kind of like a static radio station, not necessarily clear lines of thought, but sometimes there are clear lines. So where's that coming from? Do I agree with that? So we investigate this material if it feels interesting to do that. And then we do this thing where we say, can we pull away? Just right here in the thick of it. Do we have the courage to drop out of thought and come into this present moment, right? So any practice too that brings you into the body. Because remember, when we're lost in thought and in our narratives, it's like we're a little head above the neck. There's no body. So we turn the lens. If we feel like it, we can question, do you even believe? Does that sound true to you, any of that? Or does it interest you? These sorts of questions, because there's now an I and an it. And then we come into the body. We feel the weight of the body. We tune into that sort of vibration of just being alive. We feel our hands. We take a conscious breath. Anything, the body is our portal into this present moment. It's like taking a direct flight into now. We cannot be lost in thought, in a narrative, when we're actually tuned into the body. So we use the body as this incredible vehicle into the present moment. Those are our techniques. I also suggest, if people can, and we always can, even though our mind tells us we can't, set aside 10 minutes in a day where we can, if you want to do a sort of simple meditation practice, you just see if your mind can stay lightly on the breath. Just follow one breath at a time. It's going to go off into its chatter. Bring it back to the breath, right? That'll happen 300 times in a 10-minute sit, if not more. That's an incredible practice because what you're doing is you're building that muscle that is to witness the mind. When we turn the lens of meditation on the mind, We're staying with the breath, and then we're noticing, oh, look, a worry thought came in. Oh, look, a regret thought came in. Oh, a grievance thought, whatever comes in, we're just noticing. We're building the muscle that it is to witness the mind, to be something that is other than the mind. All of those can be practiced. The thing is, we did not get to where we are in terms of our addiction to thinking overnight. It is a many glimpses over time kind of deprogramming. And there comes a point, and I know this, you know, with hundreds of clients and my own experience, where the alignment shifts, the identification shifts, and we're more aligned with awareness than we are with thought. And that just gets broader and broader. So we're not being dragged around all day long by whatever nonsense our mind is throwing at us.
Does anybody else have any questions for Nancy since we have her here? Go ahead.
I don't necessarily have a question, but
Or
just
a
wanted
thought.
to. I have a thought. I have a thought. So I am going to be 60 this summer, and I feel like my daughters are about launched. My youngest graduates high school in a couple weeks, and I pretty much put myself on hold for the past 22 years for them. And before that, I was a graphic designer and working in advertising and design in San Francisco. And I've put myself on hold, and now it's time for me to do me. And the fact that I'm 60 and have been out of the market for so long is terrifying to me. And so my ruminating thoughts are twofold. One is, what the hell am I going to do with myself now? I live in Santa Barbara, California, and I desperately want to get to New York because that's my favorite place on earth. And my husband's like, go, have fun. You know, we're at that point. And so my daughters both have sort of disabilities, one psychological and one, my younger has epilepsy. So I have this like huge guilt about moving on for myself because they're going to be in California. And I think, what if they need me? What if there's a seizure? What if, you know, something terrible happens? So I'm really torn about my obligation to my girls, but also I'm at a point where I have a chance to, you know, do something else. And I guess what I ruminate about the most is, what is that thing that I'm going to do? So it's half, what am I going to do? And it's half, am I abandoning my kids, even though they're adults now, you know? So that's what's going on. I didn't want to make it about me too much because I know everybody's got stuff, but how do I turn, oh, thank you for the happy upcoming wish. How do I turn off the purpose message that keeps going around in my head? Like, what's my purpose now that I'm, you know, starting a new chapter? How do I turn that off?
Well, I think, first of all, you know, just to support you there for a moment, it is a hard spot you're in. It's a really hard spot. And what I'm tuning into is this wanting in you, right? This wanting to have something for yourself.
Very much so. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I really hear that loudly. And then I hear a mind that's coming in that's saying, but I should ... And my sense is that what might help is to become a bit more intimate with the longing for a life. And to let that have its own space a little bit more. Mm-hmm. Right? Because some of the ruminating is the anxiety around that longing, right? To turn it into something I can figure out right away. And what is it? And what is it? And, you know, if I think about it enough, but it's deeper than that. It's like a life calling. It's saying, I want to be nourished. I want to be fulfilled in a deeper way than just all these roles I've played. And that's the place that we want to let be without maybe cluttering it up with too much ruminating and thinking.
Mhm.
Does that resonate?
It 1 bazillion%. And I've been working on it in therapy and all that, but I don't want to take up more time for,
Right.
because this is everybody, but thank you for that. And
But let me say one last thing too, which is, so when the ruminating and the ruminating and the ruminating, what we can do also from a very compassionate place, right, is, hey, sweetie, I get your anxiety. I'm talking to my mind about wanting so deeply to know how to make this me happen and be actualized. And what I know right now is I don't know what that looks like. I don't know how that's going to manifest. I get you, I hear you, I see you. And all the ruminating about it, it may not be helping me find its way, but I hear you, and I'm not going to let that go.
That's very helpful. Thank you. I've been ruminating for decades, so that will be hard to make it okay, but I'll work on it. Thank you. And I'm going to check out your book. So
okay, good.
Thank you.
And I'm going to say one last thing too, which is it's okay sometimes if it's not okay. That part of moving forward is that it may not be all okay, and I may have to do it anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
That's a place as women we're not that comfortable with, which is how can I, make everything work? But sometimes I will have to be more frightened by being in New York if there's, God forbid, a seizure where I'm not available immediately. Although right now, with the technology, we can pretty much be available absolutely everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
But I may have to get okay with choosing me this time.
It's 2:00.
Oh, that's my little my little computer that talks to me, so I stay on time. Sorry.
Well, thank
Nancy,
you for that. Thank
so
you.
beautiful. Kimberly, thank you for sharing. And come check out more of Covey, because we do a lot of
I
this
will.
discussion. We're all about reinvention, moving forward. And as you can see from the people here, we hold a space for that. You don't have to have answers. And I'll just tell you, Nancy, your discussion with Kimberly, I got all kinds of goosebumps, which is always my thing. Like when I read a piece or about that, I know we're in the right zone. But that was really quite beautiful. And you don't have to have the answer because it doesn't come quickly. But sometimes, we can hold a space for that. And everybody goes
Thank
at their
you.
own pace, So thank you all. Nancy, thank you. Unbelievable. Thank you a million times. And
Pleasure.
so appreciate it. And yes, Julia, go ahead.
I missed the first few minutes of the webinar. Is the book on audio or is it?
It's right now it's available print and Kindle, and it comes out audio July, I believe it's July 10th.
Oh, good. I just love, I take walks when I'm listening to books, and somehow I learn better by hearing.
Yes. But
Everybody has a different way of learning. Yep.
Yeah.
If anybody wants to reach me, you can reach me through my website, which is nancycollier.com.
We put all the links for Nancy in the chat there, guys, and to the book.
Yeah.
So right there, you can grab them. I'm just going to tell you what's coming, just so you know. We have our positive mornings for any of you who don't know them. Those are our coaching sessions, Monday morning, 9 to 10 Eastern time with our reinvention coaches, Dana Hilmer and Wendy Parati, where you get a boost for the week and you can a tool to operate on the week. And now we're doing some workshops on very specific things that we're having troubles with. We have a great thing coming. Rosella Kennedy is a member of the club, and she runs a thing called the Brave Sis Project. And she's going to do an event with us called You've Read All the Books on Racism, Now What? Learning, building, and committing to a new cross-racial solidarity and sisterhood. And I'm really excited about that. So I know a lot of people want to understand how to get into that without saying the wrong things, doing the wrong things. So I hope you'll all come. And then reinventing our relationship with money, how to make it work for what you really care about. That's Wednesday, June 2nd at 2 p.m. And that's Janine Firpo, who's a longtime executive at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and the World Bank, and the author of Activate Your Money. And she's going to talk about how to do value-aligned investing and why it matters, and teach us how to move into our true financial power, which we all need. So we got a lot coming. Nancy, thank you so much. And now I'm going to drag Nancy to join us on our event. I'm working on the save the date, guys. We're going to do it. We're going to try to do our retreat. So anyway, talk to you later. Thank you all, Nancy. So much thanks.
My
Thank
pleasure.
you very much.
Very
Bye-bye.
beautiful. Thank you all for sharing so openly.
Bye, Lesley.
Thank
Bye,
you very much.